The human had no money, and the alien landlady had no husband. Ryland Devereaux, the dashing human with styled blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, paced the floor of his rented room, his mind racing. The rent was due and his pockets were empty. He'd been stranded on Siphon Prime for months, his ship impounded, his funds depleted. The neon-lit alien city outside his window seemed to mock his predicament, its vibrant life and endless opportunities just out of reach. A firm knock at the door jolted Ryland from his thoughts. He knew that knock, the authoritative rap of his landlady, Xaria Phyloth. Steeling himself, he opened the door, his most charming smile at the ready. Xaria stood in the hallway, her lavender skin seeming to glow under the dim lights. Her white hair cascaded down her back in shimmering waves, her sapphire eyes fixing Ryland with an intense gaze. "Mr. Devereaux," she said, her melodic voice sending a shiver down Ryland's spine. "I believe we have some business to discuss." Ryland leaned against the doorframe, his posture relaxed and inviting. "Xaria, my dear, you know you can call me Ryland. And please come in. Let's talk." Xaria swept past him, her long skirts brushing his legs. The door closed behind her with a soft click. "Ryland," she began, turning to face him. "It's the first of the month. You know what that means?" Ryland sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know, the rent. Look, Xaria, I promise I'm working on it. I've got some leads, some big deals in the works. I just need a little more time." Xaria stepped closer, her exotic perfume enveloping Ryland. "Time is a luxury, Ryland. One that I'm not sure I can afford to give you." Her hand reached out, fingers grazing the collar of his shirt. "Unless—" Ryland's pulse quickened, his skin tingling at her touch. "Unless what?" A sly smile curved Xaria's lips. "Unless we can come to some sort of arrangement. A dashing rogue like you must have many talents. Perhaps there's something you could do for me in exchange for leniency." Ryland swallowed hard, his mind racing with the implications of her words. The way Xaria looked at him, the heat in her gaze, the suggestive lilt in her voice. It was an invitation, a temptation. Part of him longed to accept, to pull her into his arms and lose himself in her alien beauty. But another part, the part that clung to his honor, his sense of right and wrong, held him back. He gently took Xaria's hand, lifting it from his chest. "Xaria," he said softly, "you have no idea how much I appreciate the offer. And believe me, there's nothing I'd like more than to express my gratitude, but I can't. Not like this. You deserve better than some deadbeat spacer trying to charm his way out of debt. I respect you too much to take advantage of your kindness." Xaria blinked, surprise flickering across her features. She stepped back, studying Ryland with a new intensity. "You're a rare breed, Ryland Devereaux. Not many men would turn down such an offer." Ryland shrugged, a rueful smile on his lips. "What can I say? I'm old-fashioned like that." A thoughtful look crossed Xaria's face. "1 week," she said finally. "I'll give you 1 more week to come up with the rent. But after that—" "I understand," Ryland said, relief and gratitude washing over him. "Thank you, Xaria. I won't let you down." As Xaria left, Ryland let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He had a reprieve, but the clock was ticking. He needed to find a way to make some quick cash, and fast. Over the next few days, Ryland hit the streets of Siphon Prime, chasing down every lead, every rumor of work. He haggled with merchants, charmed his way into high-stakes card games, even took on a few risky courier jobs. Slowly but surely, the money began to trickle in. All the while, Xaria seemed to be everywhere. In the hallways of the boarding house, in the markets where Ryland sought his fortune, even in his dreams, her presence was a constant, a tantalizing reminder of the desire that simmered between them. She would find excuses to visit his room, to linger in his doorway. Her touches became more frequent, more bold. A hand on his arm, a brush of her fingers against his cheek. Her words were laced with double meanings, playful suggestions that left Ryland's head spinning. "You know, Ryland," she purred one evening, leaning in close. "If you ever need help relaxing after a long day, my door's always open." Ryland's heart raced, his body responding to her proximity. "I'll keep that in mind," he managed, his voice rough. Xaria smiled, a wicked gleam in her eye. See that you do." And with a wink, she was gone, leaving Ryland aching and frustrated. But Ryland held fast to his resolve. He channeled his pent-up energy into his work, his determination to prove himself. And as the week drew to a close, he found himself standing in Xaria's office, a stack of credits in his hand. "Your rent, my lady," he said with a flourish, laying the money on her desk. "Paid in full." Xaria counted the credits, a smile playing at her lips. "Well done, Ryland. I must say, I'm impressed." Ryland grinned, pride swelling in his chest. "I told you I'd come through." Xaria rose from her chair, circling the desk to stand before him. "Indeed you did." Her hand trailed up his chest, her touch searing through his shirt. "And now that our business is concluded, perhaps we can discuss other matters." Ryland's breath caught, his pulse pounding in his ears. "Other matters?" Xaria leaned in, her lips a hair's breadth from his. "I think you know exactly what I mean." And then she was kissing him, her mouth hot and hungry against his. Ryland groaned, his arms coming around her, pulling her close. The kiss deepened, their tongues tangling, their bodies molding together. They stumbled back into Xaria's private quarters, hands grasping, clothes falling away. They fell onto her bed, a tangle of limbs and gasps and sighs. Ryland explored the curves and hollows of Xaria's body, marveling at the softness of her skin, the alien beauty of her form. Xaria arched beneath him, her nails raking his back, urging him on. They moved together, their passion cresting, breaking, leaving them spent and sated in each other's arms. Ryland held Xaria close, stroking her hair, marveling at the turn his life had taken. "Stay with me," Xaria murmured, her head on his chest. "Stay here on Siphon Prime." Ryland smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "There's nothing I'd like more." And so the human male found a home, and the alien landlady found love in the most unexpected of places. Ryland stirred from his slumber, the first rays of the Siphon Prime sun filtering through the window. He reached out, seeking Xaria's warmth, but found her side of the bed empty. Frowning, he sat up, listening for any sign of her in the adjoining room. Instead of her usual morning humming, he heard a muffled cough, followed by a pained groan. Alarmed, Ryland quickly dressed and knocked on her door. "Xaria, are you all right?" Silence, then a weak voice. "Come in, Ryland." He entered to find Xaria propped up in bed, her vibrant lavender skin now ashen and glistening with sweat. Her sapphire eyes, usually so bright and mischievous, were dulled by pain. "Oh, Xaria," he murmured, his heart clenching as he moved to sit beside her. "What's wrong?" Xaria attempted a smile, but it came out as a grimace. "It seems I've caught that blasted Siphonian flu that's been going around. I thought I was invincible, but apparently even my superior alien biology has its limits." Ryland took her hand, his brow furrowing at the heat radiating from her skin. "Have you seen a doctor? Taken any medicine?" She shook her head, then winced at the movement. "The clinics are overrun, and the prices for medication have skyrocketed. I thought I could tough it out, but..." She trailed off, a cough racking her body. Ryland's jaw clenched. He knew all too well the struggle of affording medical care on Siphon Prime. The system was rigged against the poor, the sick, the desperate. But he'd be damned if he let Xaria suffer. "Don't worry about that," he assured her, his voice firm with determination. "I'll find a way to get you the medicine you need. I promise." Xaria squeezed his hand weakly, her eyes searching his. "Ryland, you don't have to do this. I know you're barely scraping by as it is. I can't ask you to..." "You're not asking," he interrupted gently, brushing a strand of damp hair from her forehead. "I'm offering. You've done so much for me, Xaria. You've given me a home, a chance, when no one else would. Let me do this for you. Please." Tears welled in Xaria's eyes, her lower lip trembling. "I don't deserve you, Ryland Devereaux." He smiled softly, leaning in to press a tender kiss to her forehead. "You deserve the world, Xaria Phyloth, and I intend to give it to you." Over the next few days, Ryland scoured the city for leads on affordable Siphonian flu medication. He visited every clinic, every pharmacy, every back alley dealer he could find. But everywhere he went, the story was the same. Supplies were dwindling, prices were soaring, and the epidemic was spreading like wildfire. Desperate, Ryland turned to the only resource he had left, his old contacts from his less-than-legal past. He'd sworn he'd never go back to that life. But for Xara, he'd do anything. With a heavy heart, he made the call. "Grix," he said, his voice tight. "It's Devereaux." A surprised chuckle crackled over the comm. Well, if it isn't the prodigal son. Thought you gone straight, Devereaux. What's the matter? The honest life not paying the bills?" Ryland closed his eyes, his grip tightening on the comm. "I need a favor, Grix. I'm looking for Siphonian flu meds. You know where I can find some?" Silence, then. "Might know a guy, but it'll cost you, big time." Ryland's stomach dropped. He knew what dealing with Grix entailed. The risks, the moral compromises, the steep prices. But the thought of Xara suffering, of losing her. "Name your price," he said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. When Grix told him the figure, Ryland nearly dropped the comm. It was more than he'd make in a year, even if he worked every waking hour. But he couldn't back out now. "Fine," he gritted out. "Tell me where to meet your guy." And so began Ryland's descent back into the criminal underworld. He took on every job Grix sent his way, no matter how dangerous or demeaning. He worked in the mines, the factories, the docks, taking shifts no one else wanted, pushing himself to the brink of exhaustion. He smuggled contraband, ran illegal errands, even participated in a few heists. All the while he cared for Xara, bringing her meals, helping her bathe, holding her through the worst of the fevers. He hid his bruises, his cuts, his weariness, not wanting to burden her with his troubles. She had enough to worry about, but Xara was no fool. When she saw the toll it was taking on him, the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. One night, as he held her shivering form, she looked up at him with fever-bright eyes. "Why are you doing this, Ryland?" she asked, her voice a hoarse whisper. "Why are you killing yourself for me?" Ryland swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. "Because I love you, Xara," he said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "I'd do anything for you, anything." Xara's eyes widened, her breath catching. You love me?" He nodded, a sad smile on his lips. "I have for a while now. I just didn't know how to say it. I didn't think you could ever feel the same way about a lowly human like me." Tears spilled down Xara's cheeks. "Oh, Ryland," she breathed, reaching up to cup his face with a trembling hand. "I love you too. So much. You're the most amazing man I've ever known, human or otherwise." They held each other close, their love a fleeting respite from the pain and uncertainty of the world outside. For a moment, nothing else mattered. Not the illness ravaging Xara's body, not the dangerous path Ryland was walking. They had each other, and that was enough. But reality could only be held at bay for so long. As the days passed, Xara's condition worsened, despite Ryland's best efforts. The medicine Grix had promised was always just out of reach, the price always rising just when Ryland thought he had enough. He was running out of time, and he was terrified. One night, as he sat by Xara's bedside, holding her hand as she slept fitfully, he made a decision. He couldn't lose her. He wouldn't. No matter what it took, no matter what he had to do, he would save her, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. Ryland's heart raced as he entered the seedy bar on the outskirts of Siphon Prime. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of cheap liquor, the patrons a mix of humans and aliens, all with the same hard, desperate look in their eyes. He scanned the room, searching for the contact Grix had mentioned, a rival gang leader, willing to trade the Siphonian flu medicine for Ryland's participation in a major heist. It was a risky gamble, but Ryland was out of options. Xara's life hung in the balance. A figure emerged from the shadows, his reptilian features and scarred hide marking him as a Borgoth, a notoriously ruthless species. "Devereaux," he hissed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "I hear you're in need of some merchandise." Ryland nodded, his jaw tight. "I am, and I hear you can provide it, for a price." The Borgoth grinned, his razor-sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. "Indeed, the job is simple, a little smash and grab at the Siphon Prime Central Bank. You get us inside, we get the goods, and you get your medicine. Easy as pie." Ryland's stomach churned. A bank heist. It was madness. The security at ZPCB was airtight. the consequences of failure unthinkable. But what choice did he have? "I'm in," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "When do we start?" The heist was set for the following night. Ryland spent the intervening hours in a haze of preparation and dread, his mind torn between the technical details of the plan and the constant, gnawing worry for Xara. He visited her that evening, his heart breaking at the sight of her frail form, her once vibrant skin now a sickly gray. "Hey, beautiful," he murmured, taking her hand in his. "How are you feeling?" Xara managed a weak smile, her eyes fluttering open. "Better now that you're here," she whispered, her voice thin and reedy. "Stay with me." Ryland swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "Always," he promised, climbing into bed beside her and gathering her in his arms. "I'll never leave you, Xara, never." They held each other through the night, their love a fragile shield against the looming specter of death. Ryland memorized every detail of her face, the feel of her skin, the sound of her breath, knowing it might be the last time he ever held her. Morning came all too soon. Ryland extracted himself gently from Xara's embrace, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "I love you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Always remember that." Then he was gone, steeling himself for the task ahead. The heist began smoothly enough. Ryland, using his skills from his past life, managed to bypass the bank's security systems, allowing the Borgoth and his crew access to the vault. They worked quickly, efficiently, stuffing their bags with cash and precious gems. But just as they were about to make their escape, all hell broke loose. Alarms blared, security doors slammed shut, and the unmistakable sound of police sirens filled the air. Ryland's heart sank as he realized the truth. They'd been set up. The Borgoth turned on him, his eyes blazing with fury. "You!" he snarled, his clawed hand wrapping around Ryland's throat. "You led them right to us!" Ryland choked, scrabbling at the Borgoth's grip. No!" he gasped out. I wouldn't." But it was too late. The Borgoth threw him to the ground, his head cracking against the hard marble floor. Stars exploded behind his eyes, pain lancing through his skull. Through the haze of agony, he saw the Borgoth and his crew making a run for it, leaving him behind to take the fall. Despair washed over him, cold and crushing. He'd failed Xara, failed himself, and now he would pay the price. The police found him there, barely conscious and surrounded by the evidence of his crime. They hauled him away, his hands cuffed behind his back, his future bleak and hopeless. In the days that followed, Ryland languished in a cell, his thoughts consumed by Xara. He had no way of knowing if she was even still alive, if his sacrifice had been for nothing. The uncertainty was torture, worse than any physical pain. When the guards finally came for him, he was almost relieved. At least now he would know his fate. But the news they brought was worse than any sentence. Xara was dead. The words hit Ryland like a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs, the strength from his limbs. He collapsed to his knees, a wordless cry of anguish tearing from his throat. She was gone. His love, his light, his everything, gone forever. And it was all his fault. The guards left him there, broken and sobbing on the cold concrete floor. He didn't care. Nothing mattered anymore. Not his freedom, not his future, not his own life. Without Xara, he was nothing. Time lost all meaning in the dark, endless days that followed. Ryland existed in a haze of grief and despair, his once vibrant spirit withered and gray. He barely noticed it when they released him. The charges against him mysteriously dropped. He wandered the streets of Siphon Prime, a ghost in a world that no longer held any warmth or color, until the day of Xara's funeral. He stood at the back of the crowd, his eyes fixed on the sleek silver casket that held the remains of his heart. Aliens of all species had come to pay their respects, a testament to the love and light Xara had brought to so many lives. As the service drew to a close, a figure detached itself from the mourners, moving toward Ryland with purposeful strides. His breath caught in his throat as he saw her face. She was the image of Xara, from her lavender skin to her sapphire eyes, to the waves of white hair that cascaded down her back. But she was younger, her features softer, her bearing more innocent. "Ryland Devereaux?" she asked, her voice a bittersweet echo of her mother's. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. She took his hand, her touch sending a jolt through his numb, deadened nerves. "My name is Asha," she said softly. "Xara was my mother. Ryland's eyes widened, his heart stuttering in his chest. "Your mother?" Asha nodded, a sad smile on her lips. "She told me about you in her last days, about your love, your sacrifice. She wanted me to find you, to tell you." Her voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. "To tell you that she loved you until the very end." Raylene gathered her in his arms, his own tears falling to mingle with hers. They clung to each other, two lost souls united in their grief, in their love for the amazing woman who had touched both their lives. And in that moment, Ryland felt a flicker of something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. In the weeks following Xaria's funeral, Ryland found himself drawn to Asha, the living embodiment of the woman he'd loved and lost. She was so much like her mother, the same quick wit, the same gentle heart, the same fierce determination in the face of adversity. But she was also her own person, with dreams and desires and a unique spark that captivated Ryland in ways he couldn't quite explain. He took it upon himself to guide her, to help her navigate the complex and an often treacherous world of Siphon Prime. Asha had been studying Awful World when Xaria fell ill, and her return had been a whirlwind of grief and responsibility as she struggled to fill her mother's shoes. Together, they worked to keep Xaria's boarding house running, Ryland handling the repairs and maintenance, while Asha managed the tenants and finances. It was hard work, but fulfilling, a way to honor Xaria's legacy and the home she had created for so many. As the days turned into weeks, Ryland and Asha grew closer, their shared labor and shared sorrow forging a bond that went beyond mere friendship. They found comfort in each other's presence, in the easy banter and lingering glances that passed between them. But Ryland held back, his guilt and grief still raw and aching. How could he even think of moving on, of finding happiness again, when Xaria's loss was still so fresh? It felt like a betrayal, a desecration of her memory. Asha sensed his hesitation, his inner turmoil. One evening, as they sat together on the rooftop terrace, watching the twin moons of Siphon Prime rise over the city, she turned to him, her sapphire eyes soft and understanding. "She wouldn't want this for you, you know," she said quietly. "My mother. She wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life in mourning, punishing yourself for things beyond your control." Ryland swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. "I know," he whispered, "but it's not that easy. I loved her, Asha. I loved her more than I ever thought possible, and I failed her in the end. I couldn't save her." Asha took his hand, her touch warm and comforting. "You did everything you could, Ryland. You loved her. You fought for her. You were willing to sacrifice everything for her. That's not failure. That's the greatest gift anyone can give." She paused, her gaze holding his. "And she loved you too, so much. She would want you to be happy, to find joy and purpose and love again, even if it's not with her." Ryland's heart clenched, a bittersweet ache blooming in his chest. He knew Asha was right. Xaria had been the most selfless, generous soul he'd ever known. She would never begrudge him a second chance at happiness, even if that chance was with her own daughter. The thought sent a thrill of excitement and trepidation through him. He couldn't deny the attraction he felt for Asha, the way his pulse quickened when she was near, the way his skin tingled at her touch. But the idea of acting on those feelings, of crossing that line, filled him with uncertainty. Asha seemed to sense his inner conflict. She smiled softly, squeezing his hand. "It's okay, Ryland. We don't have to figure it all out right now. We have time. Let's just focus on the present, on being there for each other, and see where the journey takes us." Ryland nodded, a wave of gratitude and affection washing over him. "Thank you, Asha, for everything. I don't know what I'd do without you." She leaned in, resting her head on his shoulder. "You'll never have to find out. I'm here, Ryland, for as long as you'll have me." They sat like that for a long time, drawing strength and comfort from each other's presence. Now the silence between them filled with unspoken understanding. In the days that followed, Ryland and Asha settled into a comfortable routine, their bond deepening with each shared moment. They worked side by side, laughed together over meals, and spent long evenings in conversation, learning each other's hopes and dreams and fears. Slowly but surely, the wounds of the past began to heal, the ache of loss easing into a bittersweet memory. Ryland found himself smiling more, laughing easier, his heart opening to the possibility of a future he'd once thought lost forever. And at the center of that future was Asha. She was a balm to his battered soul, a beacon of light in the darkness that had consumed him. With her, he felt whole again, alive in a way he hadn't been since Xaria's passing. It was inevitable, perhaps, that their relationship would blossom into something more. A brush of hands here, a lingering embrace there, until one night, under the shimmering lights of the Siphon Prime skyline, their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home. They took things slowly, savoring each new step in their journey together. Their first real date, a picnic in the lush gardens of the city center. The first time they made love, a night of tender passion and whispered devotion. The first "I love you," spoken in the hush of dawn, their bodies entwined and their hearts beating as one. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Rylan was truly, incandescently happy. But life, as he had learned, was rarely simple or straightforward. Their newfound bliss was shattered by the sudden appearance of a figure from Asha's past, her estranged father, Saran. He arrived without warning, striding into the boarding house like he owned the place, his cold blue eyes sweeping over Rylan with undisguised disdain. "So," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt, "this is the human my daughter has been wasting her time with. The one who let my beloved Xaria die." Rylan felt Asha stiffen beside him, her hand tightening on his arm. "Father," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger, "you have no right to be here. No right to speak to Rylan that way." Zoran scoffed. "I have every right. I am your father, and I will not stand by and watch you throw your life away on this inferior creature." He turned to Ryland, his gaze hard and unforgiving. "I know what you did, human. I know how you failed Xaria when she needed you most, and I will not allow you to do the same to Asha." Ryland's heart sank, the old guilt and self-loathing rising up to choke him. Part of him wanted to run, to hide from the accusation in Soran's eyes, the truth of his words. But then he felt Asha's hand in his, her strength and love flowing into him, bolstering him. He met Zoran's gaze, his own eyes clear and steady. "You're right," he said, his voice calm and even. "I did fail Xaria. I'll live with that regret for the rest of my life. But I also loved her, with everything I had, and she loved me. That's something you can never take away." He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "And now I love Asha, and she loves me. What we have, it's real and it's good and it's worth fighting for. And I will fight for it, for her, with my last breath." Asha stepped forward, her chin high and her eyes blazing. "I choose Rylan, Father. I choose our love, our life together. And if you can't accept that, then you have no place here. No place in my heart." Zoran's face twisted with rage and disgust. For a moment, Rylan thought he might strike them. But then, with a final venomous glare, he turned on his heel and stormed out, leaving a ringing silence in his wake. Asha sagged against Rylan, her brave facade crumbling as the tears began to fall. He held her close, murmuring words of comfort and love, his own heart aching for the pain and rejection she'd endured. But even in that moment of darkness, he felt a flicker of hope, of fierce, unshakable certainty. They would weather this storm and any others that came their way. Together they could face anything. Their love was a force to be reckoned with, a love that had been forged in the fires of loss and grief and sacrifice, a love that had brought them both back to life, and it was a love that would last through whatever challenges and triumphs the future held. Forever. Life settled into a new rhythm for Ryland and Asha, their love a constant pulse beneath the daily routines of running the boarding house. They faced each challenge as a team, their bond growing stronger with every shared triumph and setback. It was a life Rylan had never dared to dream of, a future he'd thought lost to him forever. But with Asha by his side, he felt like anything was possible. Even starting a family, they hadn't planned it, hadn't even discussed it beyond the abstract. But when Asha came to him one morning, her eyes shining with a mixture of joy and trepidation, he knew. "Rylan," she whispered, taking his hands in hers, "I'm pregnant." For a moment, the world seemed to stop, his heart skipping a beat as the magnitude of her words sank in. A baby, their baby, a tiny perfect blend of human and Siphonian, a living embodiment of their love. Tears sprang to his eye, a grin splitting his face as he gathered Asha into his arms, spinning her around in a giddy circle. "Really?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "You're sure?" She nodded, her own tears spilling over as she laughed. "I'm sure. I went to the medic yesterday. They confirmed it." Ryland kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring all his love and wonder and gratitude into the embrace. When they finally parted, breathless and beaming, he rested his forehead against hers. "We're going to be parents," he marveled, his hand drifting down to rest on her still flat stomach. "I can't believe it." Asha covered his hand with her own, her smile soft and radiant. "Believe it, my love. This is real. This is happening." In the days and weeks that followed, they threw themselves into preparations for the new addition to their family. They converted one of the empty rooms in the boarding house into a nursery, painting the walls in soothing shades of lavender and green, filling it with all the necessities a baby could need. Ryland doted on Asha, his love and protectiveness reaching new heights as he watched her body change and grow with each passing day. He marveled at the miracle of it, the way her skin glowed and her eyes sparkled, the gentle curve of her belly that housed their child. He talked to the baby, read to them, sang to them. He wanted them to know his voice, to feel his love, even before they entered the world. But amidst the joy and anticipation, there was also a threat of uncertainty, of fear for the challenges they knew lay ahead. How would they balance the demands of new parenthood with the already hectic life of running the boarding house? How would their tenants, their friends and neighbors react to the news of a half-human, half-Siphonian child? And most pressing of all, how would Zoran, Ash's father, respond when he learned he was to be a grandfather? They knew they couldn't keep the news from him forever. As much as Asha had distanced herself from her father after his cruel rejection of their relationship, he was still a part of her life, a part of their child's heritage. They decided to tell him together, to present a united front in the face of whatever reaction he might have. Asha sent him a message, inviting him to the boarding house for dinner, hinting that they had important news to share. Ryland was a bundle of nerves on the day of the dinner, his stomach in knots as he helped Asha prepare the meal, set the table, arrange the flowers. He wanted everything to be perfect, to create an atmosphere of warmth and welcome, or even in the face of Zoran's likely hostility. When the chime sounded announcing Zoran's arrival, Ryland felt his heart leap into his throat. He squeezed Asha's hand, drawing strength from her touch, her presence. "Ready?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her own nerves evident in the tightness around her eyes, the set of her jaw. "Ready?" They greeted Zoran together, Asha embracing him stiffly, Ryland offering a polite nod. Zoran's gaze was cool, assessing, his posture rigid as he stepped into their home. The meal was a tense affair, the conversation stilted and formal. Zoran barely touched his food, his attention focused on Asha, on the way Ryland's hand rested on her knee beneath the table. Finally, as the plates were cleared away, Asha took a deep breath, meeting her father's gaze head-on. "Father," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "Ryland and I have something to tell you." Zoran's eyes narrowed, his lips thinning. "So I gathered." "Out with it, then." Asha reached for Ryland's hand, lacing their fingers together. "I'm pregnant," she said, her chin high, her eyes shining with a fierce, protective love. "Ryland and I are going to have a baby." For a long, tense moment, Zoran was silent, his face an unreadable mask. Then slowly he leaned back in his chair, his gaze shifting from Asha to Ryland and back again. "I see Chanadisvi," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. "And I suppose you expect me to offer my congratulations? My blessing?" Asha's grip on Ryland's hand tightened, her knuckles white. "I expect you to be civil," she said, her voice hard, "to respect our choices, our family." Zoran scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Family? You call this abomination a family? A half-breed child, spawned by a human and a Siphonian?" Ryland felt anger surge through him, hot and fierce. He started to rise, to lash out, but Asha's hand on his arm stopped him. "Our child," she said, her voice ringing with conviction, "is not an abomination. They are a blessing, a gift, a symbol of the love Ryland and I share. And they will be cherished by us and by everyone who matters." She stood then, tall and proud, her hand resting protectively over her belly. "I had hoped, Father, that you could be a part of that, that you could find it in your heart to accept our family, to love your grandchild. But if you can't, if you won't, then you have no place here, no place with us." Zoran stared at her, his face a mask of shock and anger. For a moment, Rylan thought he might explode, might rage and storm and lash out. But instead, he simply stood, his movements stiff and jerky. "Very well," he said, his voice cold as ice. "If that is your choice, your wish, then so be it. But know this, you are no longer any daughter of mine." With that, he turned on his heel and strode out, the door slamming shut behind him with a resounding finality. In the ringing silence that followed, Asha sagged against Rylan, her brave facade crumbling as the tears began to fall. He held her close, murmuring words of comfort and love, his own heart aching for the pain and rejection she'd endured. "I'm so sorry, my love," he whispered, stroking her hair, her back, her trembling shoulders. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Asha shook her head, sniffling as she looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed but fierce with determination. "No," she said, her voice rough but strong. "I'm not sorry. I won't be sorry for choosing you, for choosing our family. My father, he's made his choice, and I've made mine." She placed her hand over Rylan's heart, her touch warm and steadying. "You and this baby, you're my family now, my home, and nothing, no one, can ever change that." Rylan kissed her then, pouring all his love, his pride, his unwavering commitment into the embrace. They clung to each other, drawing strength and comfort from the bond they shared. The love that had brought them through so much, that would guide them through whatever lay ahead. And as they held each other, as they whispered promises and dreams, Rylan knew that this, right here, was where he belonged. With Asha, with their child, in the home, and the life they'd built together. Come what may, they would face it as one. A family now and forever. As Asha's pregnancy progressed, the challenges mounted. Her body, unused to carrying a half-human child, struggled under the strain. She was plagued by fatigue, by aches and pains that left her confined to bed, unable to help Rylan with the endless tasks of running the boarding house. Rylan did his best to shoulder the burden, to be the rock Asha needed, but he was only one man, and the work was never ending. He found himself stretched thin, exhausted in body and spirit, worried for Asha and their unborn child. It was in this state of near desperation that Zoran found them. He showed up unannounced one morning, his usually stern face creased with concern. "I heard about Asha's condition," he said without preamble, his gaze flicking to the stairs that led to their private quarters. "I've come to help." Rylan stared at him, too shocked to respond. In the months since their disastrous dinner, Zoran had been a ghost, absent from their lives. Rylan had assumed the breach was irreparable, the wounds too deep. But here he was, offering aid, offering a chance. Asha, when Rylan told her of her father's arrival, was cautiously optimistic. "Hey, we should let him try," she said, her hand resting on the swell of her belly. "For the sake of our child, for the sake of family, we should give him a chance." And so with no small amount of trepidation, Rylan accepted Zoran's help. At first it was awkward, the two men orbiting each other like wary cats, unsure of their place, their role. They bumped heads over the smallest things, their differing methods and personalities sparking frequent clashes. But as the days turned to weeks, a grudging respect began to grow between them. Rylan couldn't help but admire Zoran's tireless work ethic, the way he threw himself into even the most menial tasks, and Zoran, in turn, seemed to develop a gruff sort of appreciation for Rylan's dedication, his unwavering commitment to Asha and their child. Late one night, as they sat in the kitchen after a particularly grueling day, Zoran slid a glass of Siphonian ale across the table to Rylan. "You're a good man," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "I didn't see it before, didn't want to see it, but I see it now." Rylan, surprised and touched, raised his glass in acknowledgement. "Thank you," he said, meaning it. "That means a lot coming from you." Zoran grunted, taking a long pull of his own ale. I haven't made it easy for you. For either of you. I let my prejudices, my stubbornness, blind me to what really matters." He met Rylan's gaze, his eyes a startling mirror of Asha's. "You make my daughter happy. You love her, support her, fight for her. That's all a father can ask for." Ryland swallowed around the sudden lump in his throat. "I do," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love her more than anything. Her and our child." Zoran nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I know, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see that, to accept it." He leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "I want to be a part of your lives, a part of my grandchild's life. If you'll have me." Ryland didn't hesitate. He reached across the table, clasping Zoran's hand in his own. "Of course," he said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "Your family." From that moment on, something shifted between them. The tension, the guardedness, melted away, replaced by a growing camaraderie, a shared sense of purpose. They worked side by side, trading stories and memories as they went about their tasks. Zoran opened up about his life with Xara, painting a picture of a love so deep, so true it took Ryland's breath away. In turn, Ryland shared his own journey, the path that had led him to Asha, to this life, this love. They laughed together, cried together, bonded over their shared joys and sorrows. And slowly, surely, they became not just allies, but friends. Family. When Asha went into labor, it was Zoran who was at Ryland's side, steadying him as he paced the halls. Offering gruff words of encouragement and support, it was Zoran who helped him breathe through his own panic, his own fears, reminding him of his strength, his love. And when their son finally entered the world, a squalling, perfect bundle of lavender and pink, it was Zoran who wept openly, unashamedly, as he cradled his grandson for the first time. "He's beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with awe and love. "Absolutely perfect." Ryland, holding an exhausted but radiant Asha, could only nod, his own tears flowing freely. "He is," he agreed, his heart so full it felt ready to burst. "Our little miracle." They named him Zoran, a blend of their names, a symbol of the unity, the love that had brought him into being. And as they settled into their new life, their new family, Ryland marveled at the turns his path had taken, the twists of fate that had led him here. He thought of Xara, of the love and light she had brought into his life, the way she had changed him, saved him. He thought of Asha, of her strength, her courage, her wavering faith in him, in them. And he thought of Zoran, of the unexpected bond they had forged, the family they had become. It was more than he had ever dreamed of, more than he had ever thought possible. And yet it was real. It was his. A life filled with love, with purpose, with the kind of joy that could light the darkest corners of the universe. As he watched Asha nurse their son, as he listened to Zoran's off-key lullabies and tall tales, Ryland knew he was home. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that no matter what the future held, no matter what challenges or triumphs lay ahead, they would face it together. A family in every sense of the word. Bound by love, by choice, by the unbreakable ties of the heart. And as he gathered his wife and son close, as he met Zoran's misty gaze over their heads, Ryland felt a peace, a rightness settle over him. This was where he belonged. This was what he had been searching for, longing for all his life. And now that he had found it, he knew he would never let it go. He was home in every way that mattered, and he was exactly where he was meant to be.